A new government aid package for American farmers who've been hurt by Donald Trump's trade war. The U.S. is offering $12 billion in assistance. The aid package was unveiled at the White House roundtable with farmers and trade groups. President Trump claims the funds would come from the tariff revenue the U.S. has collected this year. Farmers also received some $20 billion in economic assistance during Trump's first term. Well, for more, let's turn to Joseph Glauber. He's a senior research fellow at the International Food Policy Research Institute. Joseph, what do you make of this aid bailout package, if you will? $12 billion. Is it enough to offset the losses U.S. farmers have been feeling in the face of Donald Trump's tariffs?
Well, I think the monies are going to largely go for paying for low margins. I mean, these farmers have seen very low prices. They've seen very high input costs. So fertilizer costs have been very high. The $12 billion was talked about early, at the end of the summer, early fall. And so I think farmers have still wanted to see that, despite the fact that we now have an agreement with China. But the farmers are concerned that they've been hurt by low prices and seen these tight margins that they've had to experience over the last few months.
And is it your sense this is just sort of a Band-Aid, if you will, a short-term solution? Are there long-term risks involved when you do a huge bailout like this?
Well, we've been seeing, frankly, there's just been a lot of federal money that has gone into supplemental assistance over the last 7 years. Ever since the first trade war in 2018, we had a lot of monies that were paid out during COVID. And then there was a big aid package given to farmers at the end of last year. So this is another in a series of large payments that are going to farmers. I think the problem that I see is that there are long-term costs to any trade war, and that's what happens with your competitors and other things. So we've seen this big growth in planted area in Brazil that is cut into U.S. market share, and I think that's the fear I think many farmers have going forward is if these trade wars are prolonged, that will have longer-term costs as well.
And talk about that
won't be
cost.
Compensated.
Yeah, and if you could just perhaps talk a little bit more about the hardships that U.S. farmers have faced. Especially soybean farmers.
Yeah, understand China is by far and away the largest market for U.S. soybeans, and we often talk about how 25% of the U.S. soybean crop goes to China typically in a year. And this year, of course, there's been very little sales until the last couple of weeks where we've started to see some trade pick up. But this is a period during the year where normally China will turn to Brazil and Argentina as we get into the new year, that they'll be buying a lot from them. So it's unclear when these sales actually are these shipments of soybeans from the U.S. are actually going to take place. In the meantime, Brazil has benefited from higher prices and other things because of the high demand for their soybeans because of this U.S. being out of the China market. So hopefully that gets resolved and more normalized over the next year. I think that would be good for both the U.S. and China. But again, the fear is what the longer-term costs of this might be.
And Joseph, what about U.S. consumers? How will this help us, American consumers? Donald Trump claims it will help lower food prices.
Well, I think food prices, so much of food prices are actually, a lot of those costs occur once it leaves the farm anyway, that a lot of it is packaging and transportation and wages and other sorts of things. So actually, I think the impact on food price inflation would be quite small one way or the other. And in fact, what farmers are hoping for is that they sell more to China, and that would mean less in the U.S. So in one sense, it would be higher prices for U.S. soybean producers. But I don't think that would have much impact on food price inflation one way or the other.
All right, we'll leave it there. Joseph Glauber, thank you so much.